Okay. I think I'm gonna kind of slowly begin. Again, thank you so much for everyone who is joining us. My name is Arto Vaun, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all for our first installment of Conversations on Photography for the fall 2024 season. I am the executive director of Project Save Photograph Archive based in Boston, Massachusetts. Um, uh, Project Save is the oldest, largest, and only archive in the world that is solely dedicated to the preservation and sharing of photographs from the Armenian global experience. We have over 80,000 original photographs dating back, dating back to 1832 and spanning the 19th and 20th centuries. The photographs range from everywhere from the Ottoman Empire to Soviet Armenia, Asia, South America, Europe, North America, all over the world. We are located in Boston, outside Boston, Massachusetts, in Watertown. We have a new location that we welcome anyone who's in the area. You're always more than welcome to get in touch and come check out our gallery. We have events, and of course, the archive itself for those of you who are researchers, journalists, and so forth. This series this is one of the new initiatives that we started about 2 or 3 years ago called Conversations on Photography. And what we do is we invite photographers, archivists, curators, researchers to have discussions about photography and the connections between photography, heritage preservation, and kind of everything in between. Because for us, it's very important that Project Save is a living archive, that while we are preserving photography of the past and the stories that they tell, there are photographers working today. And it's equally important for us that those photographers and their stories and their photographs are shared and, of course, archived, and that we can make these connections between the past and the present. And so, especially today, this is the first time we are doing a Conversations in Photography in collaboration with Artworks Project, which is based in Chicago and The Hague. And thank you very much to Bora Un, the executive director at Artworks Projects, for this wonderful collaboration that I hope will continue into the future. Our speaker today, Astrig Agopian, is part of the Emerging Lens Fellowship at Artworks Projects. The Emerging Lens Fellowship provides funding, mentorship, and production support for new and emerging visual storytellers, amplifying stories covering critical human rights issues within communities that are often overlooked by mainstream media. And AWP Artworks Projects will be celebrating their 10-year anniversary of the fellowship program. So for now, they're not, I think, taking new submissions to the fellowship. But I think, you can go to their website at artworksprojects.org and find out more. So I'm going to introduce Astrig. Before I do that, I just wanted to do a quick little ground rules of how usually these conversations on photography go, in terms of the logistics. I'll introduce Astrig, who then will present for about 30 minutes, something like that. After which, or during which, by the way, you can put your comments, questions into the Q&A or in the a chat. And I will then, after Astrig's presentation, as we're having a conversation, I'll have some questions for her, but also I will be filtering your comments and questions along to her, and I think we'll have a wonderful discussion. I think I do want to say that both personally and professionally, this really means a lot to me, because this is basically the 1 year anniversary of the ethnic cleansing that occurred in Nagorno-Karabakh. And I know that Astrig spent quite a lot of time there, documenting that tragedy, and has put together this amazing project called Like There's No Tomorrow. And I lived in Armenia for 7 years and was working there, and so I think this is a very timely and important discussion we're going to have today. So let me introduce Astrig Agopian. It really is my pleasure. Astrig is a French-Lebanese Armenian journalist, documentary photographer, and filmmaker born in Marseille in France. She started her career as a TV reporter and video journalist, learning the ropes of journalism while covering Brexit, French politics, and the COVID pandemic for French TV channels. Since 2021, she's documented the wars in Armenia, Karabakh, Ukraine, protests in Georgia, and has reported in France, Italy, and Lebanon. Her work's been featured in dozens of international news outlets, including, and I'm so sorry, I'm probably, my pronunciation is not very good here, France Télévision, Agence France Presse, Arte, Radio Télévision Suisse, Quotidien Le Figaro, France 24, TV5 Monde, Pulse for Austria, and others. Her photography focuses on the intersection between geopolitics, territory, marginality, and memory. Astrig's a member of Diversify Photo and a stringer for Getty Images, and her photos have been published in Der Standard, Le Figaro, Le Monde des Ados, Was des Wochenstück, Marianne Magazine, and others. She's currently based between Paris and Yerevan. It's my pleasure to welcome Astrig. The floor is yours. Thank you, Astrig.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I guess I'll just start by talking about what the project was supposed to be initially when I pitched it, when I applied for the fellowship, and then kind of what happened. And then I will start sharing my screen and we can go over the website and see the project. So initially, I moved to Armenia after the 2020 war. At the time when it happened, I was working in France as a journalist, and it made no sense for me anymore. I had this kind of, meaning, existential identity, whatever you want to call it, crisis. So I moved to Armenia and I started working mostly, almost exclusively at the beginning, on Nagorno-Karabakh, on the consequences of the war. And what I didn't know at the time was that we were going to see more wars and we were going to see the ethnic cleansing, and I would basically be covering all of that. So I started going to Nagorno-Karabakh in 2021, and as you will see soon, it was, access was forbidden for the journalists. It was quite challenging. And I actually also started working as a professional photographer in Nagorno-Karabakh. Before that, I was only filming and working for TV. And I applied for the fellowship. Initially, the idea was to do a documentary photographic project in Nagorno-Karabakh about the youth there and kind of the aftermath of war, because, you always have media attention when war is happening, and then afterwards, everybody's kind of leaving and there's less coverage, but there's so much happening. So that was the idea, and that was what I pitched to Bora and, the fellowship, to Artworks. And that's what I was supposed to do. And then at the same time, basically, when I got the news that I got the fellowship and I was going to be able to do the work, the blockade, which started in December 2022, happened. And so we didn't really know what to do. And I'm very, very thankful to Bora and the whole team at Works for never giving up on me and, staying there and always supporting me when I had to reassess what I was going to do. So I'm not going to talk longer. I'm going to show the website and explain how that unfolded. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. But now I need to, okay. So I'm not gonna play and show everything, especially not the videos, because it would take too much time, and you will all receive the link anyway afterwards to go and check it. But I'll just quickly explain what this is before we dive in. So these images I took exactly a year ago, actually, at Kornizor on the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Basically, this is the refugees, people fleeing from Nagorno-Karabakh. And so the website starts with those images, and there's a voiceover that you will hear about me talking about how this project started, but I will let all of you actually go and listen to it on the website later. So quickly, why this name? Why like there's no tomorrow? In the last 4 years, we didn't know that the ending was going to be the ethnic cleansing, but there was always this heaviness, this threat that we could feel all the time. And also, you know, we did have a few other short wars before, you know, the final one. So I was always asking people, okay, but how do you cope? How do you keep on living here? You're not scared? You know, that would always come up during our conversations, during the interviews for different channels, you know, not especially for this project yet. And they would always say, always, that's really a sentence I heard so many times, which literally is translated by like there's no tomorrow. So basically this whole idea of living day to day and not thinking about tomorrow because you don't know what is going to happen. And until the very next day, that's how people were living there, because otherwise you couldn't really make plans, you know, more than 2 days ahead, because you don't know what's going to happen the next day. And I think every time with what happened, with all the negativity and everything, it was always kind of expected, but also a surprise at the same time, because you know it's going to happen, you just don't know when. And so the very first picture is a picture that I took in 2021. Some people might recognize what this is, some others maybe you don't have any idea. This is a Smerch rocket, which is a familiar sight for many people. Soviet weapons, you know, also used in Ukraine and many other places. But as you can see, it's painted. So it's not dangerous like this. Well, I mean, it always is, but you can keep it. And basically it's at the entrance of a village in Nagorno-Karabakh, and it stayed. And there's an artist who is also a photographer, who is Armenian, who painted over it. And it just stayed like that, as far as I know, until the end. I wasn't there, obviously, in the last year during the blockade, but every time I would go to Karabakh, I would see this. And for me, it was kind of a very good symbol of what that place was, and, you know, how people feel there, because this is absolutely not normal. This is a rocket, and this is a reminder of war. But then, you know, you almost make street art on it, and you just keep it there. Like, it's part of your life. You know, war is always normal there. There's always the shadow of war. So it just stayed there. So I thought it was, you know, we wanted to open the project with this, because when you don't know about Nagorno-Karabakh, just looking at this picture, you can start, you know, having ideas of what is going on there, and what's the context. I'm not going to go into the whole, you know, details of the geopolitics and everything. I'll just maybe, okay, 2 sentences, just, I don't know if people are familiar, if everyone is familiar, but then you can ask questions, of course, if it's not clear. But basically, so Nagorno-Karabakh, or also Artsakh, is the Armenian name, which some people use in the interviews, and I might also use, is this region which was located officially and internationally for everyone kind of in Azerbaijan since the first war that happened in the 90s. However, it had a kind of de facto state kind of status. So it was an autonomous, unrecognized republic with Armenians living there before the first war. And, you know, when it became this unrecognized republic, it was a region which had mostly an Armenian population, but also Azerbaijani people living there. And then, so here you have a little timeline, which, again, I'm not going to go over everything, but so after that first war, which killed 30,000 people in total, the Azerbaijanis left the region and went back to Azerbaijan. And then there was ethnic cleansing both ways, as in no more Azerbaijanis in Armenia or Nagorno-Karabakh, and no more Armenians in Azerbaijan. There were many also in other places in Azerbaijan. And then after the war, the Armenians won, and it became so this republic. So I wasn't born when all of that happened. And then for 30 years, it was pretty, well, a lot of people would disagree with me, but let's say it was calm. It was this de facto situation. And then in 2016, that's changed with the first short war happening. And then in 2020, the second Nagorno-Karabakh war happened. And so that's our starting point for this project, because that's when I started working on this. And so that's going to be our focus is going to be between 2020, 2021, and 2024. So all those drawings that you can see, by the way, were made by refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh. It's their memories from places and things they experienced. So let's get to the pictures, because that's why we're here. So all the pictures you can see, I took between 2021 and 2022 during my trips to Nagorno-Karabakh, not knowing yet that I was going to do this project, or, I was just taking pictures on the side, because I felt speechless sometimes, even though it's literally my job to, write words and write, TV stories and film. But I think I started taking pictures in Nagorno-Karabakh because I was looking for a way to show what I was witnessing. And I thought still images were actually the best way to do it. The heaviness, but also the beauty, everything. And without having to explain, just showing a picture to people. That's the only thing I could do. So that's kind of how it started. This picture, for example, was taken in Stepanakert, which was the capital of Nagorno-Karabakh. And it's in front of Tatik Papik, which is a very famous monument. You will see later on some other pictures. I wanted to focus on the youth, because for the youngest people, it was the first war. For some still young people in their 30s, it was the second or third war already. And I kind of wanted to see, because, we always say the youth children are the future of a place. So I really wanted to see how they were experiencing this. And if, because of this context, they would, still see their future in the region or not. And so this picture was taken. I have friends who were teachers were from Karabakh and were teachers there, working with an NGO called Teach for Armenia. So I was kind of hanging out with them and their students. So this is Ashot's students in Kolkhoz Hashen, which is a village in Nagorno-Karabakh. This is a view just of Stepanakert, the hospital, the mountains, the cross. That's very common also all over Armenia to have crosses on top of the hills. And so really at first it was just hanging out with them, interviewing them, taking pictures of those moments. So, with the kids. And then, of course, there was also the other side already, which was the consequences of the war. And a few times I was embedded with Halo Trust, which is an NGO that works on demining and destroying anything dangerous, let's say, also the rockets and bullets, everything that is a consequence of war. And it's very important because there were a lot of incidents where those same kids you see in the picture before could step on a mine or something. So, all of that was part of life in Nagorno-Karabakh after the 2020 war and kind of in between, because there were other wars there. So this is also with Halo Trust on a demining mission. It was a place that exploded, obviously, so it was a military area, actually. Demining everywhere in the city, nature, there's a lot of nature, mountains, obviously in Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenia, it's the Caucasus region. This is a picture that I really like, actually. It's one of my favorite ones. I don't think it's the most impressive one, but this is very common, not only in Armenia, I guess, but is that a Slav thing? I think we call it. In post-Soviet states, just men will just like sit like that and, enjoy a cigarette or something. And so this is a deminer who was just taking a break after working for a few hours. I just really like, how I feel like it's a tender picture, the way he's looking at his colleagues. And then the nature around this is very, very Nagorno-Karabakh coded for me. And autumn there, and just, having this moment right after the explosions and the most impressive stuff. That's the little moments that I'm also looking for, except, documenting the horror. This is Tatik Papik. So that's the monument I was referring to earlier. It's a symbol for Armenians of like Armenian Nagorno-Karabakh, because they built this. So Tatik Papik literally means grandmother and grandfather. Usually when I say that, people start seeing why. And it was really also a place where people would just go to hang out, take pictures, have a picnic in front of it. So, you know, very lively, cute little place, and very symbolic. And I don't think it has been destroyed yet, but it's probably on the list. And so this is where I started working already for the fellowship project, and I was focusing on the youth. So this is a party, as you can see, and this is actually the Banagi Kev of this young man here. So military service is mandatory in Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh, and it's 2 years for boys. It's between 18 and 20 years old. So before we send off kind of the boys to the military service, we shave their head and we have this little party, like a type of farewell party. And so I went to this one, which was in Aravno village, also will mean a lot to a lot of Armenians, this village, which was handed over to Azerbaijan, not even in war times, but in between as part of an agreement following the 2020 war. But so here we can see a young man who was really not excited about going to do his military service. He's 18, but there's this party. It was really like a weird, heavy atmosphere, again, which sums up pretty well for me what it was like to be a young guy, especially a young man in Nagorno-Karabakh in those years. Because, okay, you're having this party, but at the same time, you're, you know, sorry, I just opened this. You're having a party, but you're going to military service, and you know you're in an area where war could happen. So it's actually dangerous and scary. And this is a view of also Aravno from the village at night after the party. And so I'm not going to play the video, or I might just play it a bit and talk about this place, which was very special. This was the only pub in all of Nagorno-Karabakh. I went there because when I was just asking around when I first arrived, people told me, oh, you have to go there. It's bardak, which means a mess in English, like for French speakers, le bordel, literally. And so it was founded by Azad, who was also this guy in his 30s who experienced already 3 wars, almost died in the last one in 2020. And he had founded the pub after the 2016 war. So, you know, you can see the context of needing to have a place where you can go and drink and still have fun, despite the context and everything. So initially I did a radio report about this place, but then I wanted to make a documentary, which unfortunately didn't happen as planned because of everything that happened and the blockade and everything. But so I just made this little video that you can check later on about the pub, about the story of the place, and just it's a very, very special place. And I'm happy to say that Azad survived all this and is now a refugee in Armenia, but he reopened the pub in Yerevan. And so it's a really special place, I think, for everyone who's been there. And even if you haven't, I think you can understand that when there's one pub in a place like this, it has to become a special place. And, you know, the youth didn't have many places also where to go and just enjoy life and be young. So it was a very important place. And now this is playing and this makes no sense. So I'll just stop here. But I hope you have time to go and check a bit more on this. So talking about pictures, those are not good pictures, but I want to show them to you. So when I was going back and forth, just like everyone else, I would have to cross the Lachin corridor, which was kind of the only way after the 2020 war. And we had Russian peacekeepers. So again, I'm trying not to go too much into geopolitics, but I need to explain a bit for you to understand what's going on here. So you had to cross checkpoints, and there were Russian forces who were, because, you know, the ceasefire was brokered also by Moscow in 2020. And so about 2,000 Russian peacekeepers were there to kind of ensure peace. And you had to cross their checkpoints, and after a point, it was just not allowed to go there as an international journalist. So that's also why the coverage, there was not a lot of coverage to start with, but there was even less so after that, which was in 2021. And I still went there. I'm not gonna talk too much about that, but all I can say is that I'm also an Armenian citizen, so I legally had the right to go. not to take pictures, but couldn't help it. So those are basically stolen pictures taken with my phone and videos, and you can see from the quality that they're not great, but this was basically the journey that we would take to go in. You would have to also go through the checkpoints to get out, and the Lachin corridor was also the road, the only road that people could use to flee during the mass exodus that happened last year. So those are just stolen images. Here you can see the Russian peacekeepers, and just also from the windows what you could see, mountains and everything. And then we get to the blockade. So all this, I did many journeys through this road, and then in December 2022, the road was basically closed. I mean, there are kind of several episodes even for that, but to make it short, it was closed, and then only a few people could go in with the ICRC, the Red Cross, or things like that. And then at some point, it was completely closed, and nobody could go through, and it lasted for 10 months. Before getting into the blockade and then the challenge of documenting that when you're not able to go to Nagorno-Karabakh, I also wanted to share some stories of people who were in Armenia, but affected by the war that happened in Nagorno-Karabakh. Because that's when I couldn't go back to the region, that's kind of what I started doing to keep on working. And, that's the conversation we had with Artworks about, okay, what do we do? I cannot go to the region and document the youth there, but I can keep on documenting the youth that was affected by the wars there. So this is Kolya. A lot of people might know him in Armenia because he was part of a group of 6 boys who were who after the 2020 war were kind of lost and surrounded by the Azerbaijani troops for a very long time and survived on their own. As a result of all this, Kolya lost his 2 legs, and he's now, as you can see, wearing prosthetics. I have to say, so this is, I think, one of my favorite pictures from this project, but not just because of the picture, but because of the story behind. I also have to say it's not easy, to work with very traumatized people, and also being Armenian myself, and building the relationship and earning the trust of people to then photograph them is not easy. Also because there's a lot of taboo surrounding, being disabled, even if it's due to the war, or, it's not an easy topic, and a lot of people prefer hiding, don't like to talk about it, don't want to show what happened to them. So it was always a very long process. And I spent a lot of time with Kolya before, I started actually taking pictures. And this was, I think I knew him for several months already. We had met numerous times. We had made other pictures, but I just felt like it's not him. Like I didn't manage to capture him yet until this very moment. So Kolya, I'm going to show you this. He started writing after the war and what happened to him, and he writes in Russian, which is his mother tongue, because he was actually born and raised in Russia before he came back to Armenia. And so at first we met at his home, and then tried to work with his texts and doing these overlays and everything. But he always wanted to kind of see what I was doing, and it was hard to earn his trust, which I totally get, because it's also, obviously, it's so personal what he was writing, and it's not easy to share it with the world. And then he went to this self-organized kind of community of artists in Tumanyan, which is a bit north from Yerevan in Armenia. And so this is an abandoned school, and he was living there for a while and writing and living with other artists. And I went there to kind of hang out with him for a day. And this is the last picture that I took, I think, and it became my favorite one. We were kind of tired from all the running around and trying to find the right light and talking with people. So we decided to sit here, and we didn't realize during our whole conversation and when I was taking the picture that on the back, on the wall behind him, it says Chararution, which means peace. I have no idea why that's there. It's an abandoned school. I don't know why it was there. I think he was kind of bored. I was boring him. He was tired of me. But I captured this image, which is also very much Kolya in a way that I cannot describe. And so that's why it became one of my favorite pictures. And just like him, there's so many other young men also Abdul, for example, who was a dancer before the war, and then he lost one of his legs, stopped dancing. And for example, with Abdul, you know, we did the photographic work and everything, but he didn't want to show his leg. That was a no-no from the beginning. And I tried to convince him. I wanted him to dance maybe because he dances again sometimes, but he just didn't want to. And obviously I respected that. But, you know, so a lot of different stories and people reacting in different ways. Kolia is not, you know, is not ashamed. He even wants to show his prosthetics. He told me he was proud to have prosthetics. And even if sometimes you have awkward conversations with people in the street, stopping him. It happened a few times when I was with him, taking pictures and, you know, asking questions. And sometimes you just don't want that. But so people react in different ways. And I met a lot of different people who I'm very, very thankful that they shared their stories and took the time to be with me. Sarkis, so this was all during the blockade. Sarkis is from Nagorno-Karabakh, but he came to Yerevan to get treatment after suffering from severe burns during the 2020 war. And he was stuck basically when the blockade happened. So I met him and his family, also living in horrible conditions. I mean, you can see this is a trailer, which was next to like a big garbage plant behind the capital. And I think it's also Armenian culture. We have a really hard time showing it when we're not going, you know, when we're through difficulties. So it was always a challenge, always with refugees, etc. People don't want to show that they're suffering and that they're poor or they live in bad conditions. But with Sarkis, you know, he ended up showing me his burn and where he lives, and talking about the fact that he wanted to go back. At the time, we didn't know how the blockade would end up, you know, with the exodus. But even despite everything, he also said that, you know, living in this trailer and in those conditions and people didn't really seem to care, he felt like a second-class citizen in Armenia. So that was also his main motivation, you know. That's why he wanted to go back to Nagorno-Karabakh, where he felt in a better place and like it was really his region and his home. And then, so what I started doing was to photograph in Armenia and try to find other ways to show the divide between people stuck in Armenia and their families in Nagorno-Karabakh, because a lot of families were separated because of the blockade. So this is actually the family of Narek, so the young guy you saw before who was doing his Banakikev, the farewell party in Nagorno-Karabakh. So their village, Arabno, was handed back to Azerbaijan, and after that, the family moved to Ter village, which is a village on the border in Armenia, very, very close to the Lachen corridor in Nagorno-Karabakh still, but on the Armenia side. And so this is his brother, his mother, his sisters. So I met with them, took pictures. And this is a picture on the phone of Narek, who was doing his military service on the other side. So, of course, it was very heavy, and they were very worried the whole time that something would happen, war would happen. And, you know, their brother was on the other side doing his military service, and they were separated because of the blockade. So it was very, very tense the whole time, and also a family not living in great conditions, but some parts of that they didn't allow me to show. And so I started focusing on this. This is Lilia, who is a singer. She was in Yerevan, living there, and also separated from all her family in Nagorno-Karabakh. So what we did with Lilia is she shared with me some of the voice notes that she would exchange with her family when they had enough connection and internet and electricity to be able to communicate. So I'm not going to play it, but you can listen to the voice notes, and quotes are translated in English here. Lilia had actually lost her voice after the 2020 war. She just couldn't sing anymore because of everything that happened. And then she did long work and gained her voice and was singing again, and is singing again now. And all her family got to Yerevan after the ethnic cleansing. This is Nana, who is a high school student, so really, really young. And she was actually also stuck during the blockade in Nagorno-Karabakh, because she went there for the holidays, for Christmas, and then, you know, that's when the blockade started. And she was studying in an international high school in Armenia, so she couldn't go back to school at first. And then she was actually taken by the Russian peacekeepers, because so the ICRC and the Russian peacekeepers were at some points of the blockade able to bring people in or out of Karabakh to reunite families, or in case of students like Nana. So after spending some time in the blockade, it was a very hard decision to take for her and her family, that she would have to leave and go to Armenia, not knowing what was going to happen to her family. And so she did, and I met her when she was in Armenia in her high school. These were the posters made by her classmates during the whole time she was in blockade. And then, so here we did this design, as in its stories you're going through. She also shared with me the messages she would exchange with her family members. This is her during the blockade, no electricity, so trying to study with candlelight. And then those are just the messages. Those are the coupons. Her mother sent her a picture of the coupons. So there was, because of the blockade, food was not really delivered anymore. So there was not enough food, and the local authorities made the system of coupons to distribute food. Coupons which obviously became useless after a while because there was no food anyway. But this was her graduation without her family. She was sending pictures, really hard decisions that really young people had to make. And so I was talking about people who were stuck on the other side. Some people were not able to cross and were just waiting in hotels. This is the view of Goris, the last big city in Armenia before the Lachin corridor in Nagorno-Karabakh. And those are pictures of different people who basically left Karabakh right before the blockade and then were stuck. And it's really crazy stories of, this woman, for example, I remember she left Karabakh for the first time in her life, where she was born and raised, to just go and attend a wedding in Armenia. And the next day the blockade started. So she couldn't go back home. And she was stuck for months and months. And, all her family, everything is in Nagorno-Karabakh. And she was stuck on this side. But at the same time, when these people are waiting and trying to cross, despite the blockade, despite, the first reports of starvation, they really wanted to go back home anyway. Meanwhile, in Armenia, in Nagorno-Karabakh, sorry, the shops were empty and people were just starting to do this system of, looking for something and trading it. So those are real screenshots taken at the time on social media, Facebook and other places, of what people would try to exchange. Baby food for a pack of cigarettes, because at some point there was just nothing. Everything was missing. All the shops were empty. And that's after 10 months when the offensive started. And so here you can go and see, I think it's not all charging later on the website. You can also, I think, click on them to read. Those are all taken last year, this time, screenshots from social media. Some of those people are my friends, other are sources, other are local journalists, kind of trying to tell the world what is going on, and just sharing messages about what is happening, because it was a short war, but it was war, and people had already been through 10 months of blockade when this happened. Here, I'll just quickly play the videos, but so we decided to make this diptych of what was going on, what I could cover here. I was in Armenia, on the Armenia side, and then here those are images. Well, you cannot hear them. Well, also trigger warning, you can hear bombings here. But at the same time, that's what was happening. This is why people were fleeing, because of what is happening here, which was, the attacks. There was a terrific explosion at the gas station where people were queuing to flee, take the gas. Just, people dying, absolute chaos, fears of a total massacre. The word genocide, which already means a lot for Armenians, was used. People didn't know what was going to happen, if they would be able to flee or if not. And then we were on this side seeing the first, people getting out of Nagorno-Karabakh, and it was nonstop for days. And then basically it was empty. Okay, I'm running out of time. I'm gonna maybe accelerate a bit. And then, so when that was happening, all the media were there, Samantha Power from USAID was there. And suddenly, for the first time in 4 years, I felt like there was a lot of attention. That lasted for maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 days. And then she left, and then all the media started leaving, and then Israel-Palestine started happening in October, so nobody was left, and nobody kind of took the time to cover the consequences of, well, an ethnic cleansing that had just happened. The word already started being used by institutions and everyone, but there was kind of not many people left to cover that. And then I was thinking, what can I do now? So this is not charging, but in 2020, after the 2020 war already, some people had left their homes and had lost their villages. And so another part of my project with the fellowship before the actual mass exodus was that I met with people from the 2020 war. And when I was talking with them, I realized that a lot of people didn't have time to take anything except their keys, because they left with their handbag and then they never were able to go back home. So I started doing, you cannot see it here because it's not working, but basically this project of diptychs of keys and people. This is a group of women from Hadrut. You can see one, Gemma, but you cannot see the other ones because it's okay, it's working. But basically we'll be able to click on the keys and see the story of the people. And I was doing that in 2022, not knowing that, well, the mass exodus would happen and then a lot more people would leave. And then the idea was, okay, this is different. In September, not everyone, but some people had time to gather their things before leaving. And so we go back to the very first question at the head of the website. What would you take with you if you had a few hours to leave a home that you know you're not going to go back to? And so I interviewed people and took pictures of them and the object that they took. I'm not going to go through all of them because maybe let's leave time for the questions. But so this is a series of portraits of people, the object that they took, and some quotes explaining why they took that object. Young people, older people, because now, you know, my project is not really about the youth anymore. It still is, but everybody had to leave. So there's just no Armenians left in Nagorno-Karabakh for the first time in many, many centuries. And some people, you can see, took objects like tombstones. It's very, I hope you will have time to go and read all this and the testimonies, because they express it better than I will. And that's it. We arrived to the last picture, but it didn't charge, which is a fence, but you cannot see it. And I'm going to stop talking because I promised Arto that I would not do more than 30 minutes, and I did.
It's okay. Thank you so much, Astrig. This is, I think there's so much here, and for people to really, I think, dive into. By the way, just so that I don't forget, Astrig, is there a website we can give people so that they can explore this on their own, or is that going to be announced?
Yes, but I believe Bora will send the link
Okay.
after.
Okay. Okay. So everyone, you know, stay tuned. You'll be able to get the link afterward. And Project Save will share it as well. So it'll be shared both by, of course, Artworks projects, but Project Save will share it as well. So you'll get the link so that you can take your time. So Astrid, what I thought we'd do now is you know, have kind of get the discussion going between you and I. And then as we're talking, I'm going to kind of filter in some questions that people are asking. I'm just trying to, Asig, maybe if you do the stop share on your screen.
Yes.
I'm having trouble seeing. Oh, there you are.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much. You got me thinking about so many things. One of the questions that I have for you is, you know, you've done work in the Ukraine, you've reported from Lebanon. In other words, you've been in other either war type situations or some kind of upheaval type situation in other parts of the world. did those somehow inform what you were doing in Artsakh? Um,
Well, not really, because Artsakh was my first war.
so that was,
So,
okay.
yeah, actually, Artsakh and Armenia informed my work in other areas.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's
when I
interesting.
went to Ukraine, I had already been covering, all this for 2 years. So I went to Ukraine before the invasion started initially, because I had a colleague working there, and remember there was a time we didn't expect a full-scale invasion. So I didn't go there thinking, that I was getting into that.
Yeah.
But then I went back after the invasion started, and actually my experience in Armenia and Artsakh had helped me a lot.
Mm.
But obviously, I think covering Artsakh and Armenia was different and harder for me for two reasons. First of all, it was my first war, and all the other reporters and journalists I've talked to say that, you always remember your first war in a different way because it's where you learn everything. And then obviously I'm Armenian. So I think it was even harder that it was my first war and it was personal in a way.
Yeah.
But then I think working in other areas did help me when it kept on happening in Armenia, because obviously I gained more and more experience, and maybe I started being able to have more distance, because it wasn't my first war anymore. So obviously it was still very, hard to witness, but well, it was not my only war anymore,
Yeah.
which it used to be when I first started, and I think that's why it was harder at first.
Right. Interesting. Someone had asked a question that I was also thinking about as well, so I'm going to try to phrase it. Did you get a sense, and maybe do you still get a sense, from the Karabakh Armenians that you interacted with and documented their lives and their experience, and maybe now after this tragedy, did you get a sense of the any kind of dynamics between the Armenians in Karabakh and what their feelings were? It's obviously clear in terms of Azerbaijan, that's in terms of their perspective there, of this kind of illegal aggression that was going on. But their thoughts or perceptions or the dynamics with Armenia itself.
Mhm.
Did you get any sense of because there is,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
um, I think I know what you're trying to refer to.
Yeah,
Um, Obviously, I think there was always some kind of beef between Armenians from Armenia and Armenians from Artsakh. I think to some extent exaggerated for political reasons, and that I could not always feel on the ground. But yes, there was a sense of we're different, and for two reasons. Well, Karabakh Armenians always had war in mind, and they kind of felt like Armenians in Armenia didn't, and so didn't understand them very well. And that's something really young people told me too. Like, for example, the portrait of the three sisters. She tells me that there are good people in Armenia, and yes, I like being in Armenia, and that's also my home, but people here don't understand me, even though they're Armenian.
yeah,
So there was this, this feeling always, I have to admit, and that was across all the generations.
yeah,
But then, of course, yes, there was also in some cases also people being mad at Armenia, and with what happened later, feeling completely abandoned,
right.
and kind of saying, yeah, the world doesn't care about us, but even Armenia doesn't care about us, so why should the world care about us? And of course, that's some things that I have heard, but I would say that when this happened, actually, I think I can share this. But so Azad, who is the owner and the founder of the pub,
Yeah.
when I saw him again for the first time after the ethnic cleansing in Yerevan, actually it was just on the street. It was not even crazy encounter. I wasn't supposed to meet him, and he just screamed my name, and then it's him. He told me that he was actually very touched and surprised by the way they were welcomed. in Armenia, because he told me he thought people would be throwing stones at them or blaming them, because also some people in Armenia might say, oh, it's because of this Karabakh that we always have the wars, and then the wars coming to us in Armenia. But he said that was not the case, and that people were very humane, and at least at first, I know that later on maybe there were tensions again, and again politics, but he was really surprised and thankful, and also thankful that he still had somewhere to go to flee to, that was still home in a way.
Right.
Because he's still in Armenia and he can speak Armenian and he's surrounded by Armenians. And he told me that for him, it would have been much harder to go to a completely different, different country with another language. And he was thankful he didn't have to do that. And I feel like a lot of people felt like that. Some others did not, because it was also hard to be so close to their actual home, but not able to go back to. So you get different reactions as well.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I agree. I think, my time there, even before this catastrophe, it's not really black and white, there might be, as you say, the political levels and kind of governmental levels. That's one thing. But then in terms of just between the people, it's like anything else that's a little more complex, and it's more of a gray area than just kind of a binary type thing. I did want to quickly say for people that had joined us a little bit later during your presentation. So again, this is Conversations on Photography. Very happy to have you all here. My name is Arto Vaun. I'm the Executive Director of Project Save Photograph Archive. We're speaking today with Astrig Agopian, a wonderful photojournalist from France who has spent time documenting the recent tragedy and ethnic cleansing in Karabakh. I did also want to say, connected to your project, Astrig, for the folks out there that might not know. So for a bit of the historical context here, right? That Karabakh is a very ancient Armenian territory. The Armenians there were indigenous to that area. Long before there was an Azerbaijan is a fairly modern construction. And Project Save does have photographs in our archives if people are interested to kind of see, to kind of make the historical connection between the past and with the work that people like Astrig are doing today. We have a number of photographs from Karabakh dating to the 19th century into the early 20th century. Astrig, I was wondering, I was thinking a lot of, I love the title of your project, Like There's No Tomorrow, on a lot of different levels. One, because I think it so very much speaks to the very specific tragedy that happened in Karabakh, and the kind of traumatic, how it kind of, how something like that disrupts our normal sense of time and hope and thinking about the future and all that stuff, and feeling like every day is a kind of the last day in a way. And also how some of that feels like a lot of just what's going on in the world these days. I was just thinking about how just in general, I feel like there's a much more global sense of anxiety and uncertainty these days. And then I started thinking about, because you and I were talking before the event today about our shared kind of combination of how we are Armenian, right? You were born in France and you're kind of half Armenian. Your one side is from Armenia, one side is from Lebanon, Ethiopia. Yeah. I was born in Boston. One side is from Armenia, one side is from Aleppo, Syria. And I was thinking that like there's no tomorrow, there's a sense of like in all those photos you showed and the stories of those folks, young, especially the kind of young people, but also just everybody there. It's like they were living in some kind of like liminal space, you know? It's like almost like time doesn't matter. Not that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't have the same um, structure anymore, or the days of the week, or just even thinking about their lives and their hopes and their plans and so forth, right? I was thinking, how do you think maybe there's a way that moments like that crisis are only heightened versions of maybe like a century of that? In other words, like your family, my family, I feel like at least and I'm sure you did too, I'm sure many of us did. I feel like I grew up with a lot of like there's no tomorrows. You know what I mean? Even though my family they were in the United States, you would think everything's fine, you know. But because of their own PTSD, I think there's so much generational PTSD for different reasons, the genocide, the different conflicts Armenians had found themselves in, whether it's in the civil war in Lebanon, whether it's in Karabakh, whether it's in Armenia, whether it's in other parts of the world. Do you feel like there's a way that there's some kind of strange continuity or connection that Armenians all seem to find themselves a lot in this sense of like there's no tomorrow type of a feeling?
Yeah. I don't know why that is, but absolutely. I mean, so the introduction of the project is actually about that and how I grew up hearing all those stories of people yearning, all of those homes that they left in
Mhm.
many different places that they can go back to. And so it was always there, but I was the first one from my family who didn't experience war, actually, for the first 21st years of my life. So, so I thought, well, I was wrong, and I get to what you were asking. I agree with you, but I think maybe there was for some time an illusion that it was not going to be like that.
Yeah,
Um, at least for my generation, I think, and for people my age, also even in Armenia, people who were born after the end of the USSR. They of course there was still the heritage and everything, but we thought it's gonna be better for us. It's not gonna happen again or not like that, and probably that was very naive and stupid. But I do think a lot of us really thought that,
mm,
and including Armenians in Armenia. And I can talk about all my family, my cousins, people my age there.
mm,
Um, but yes, for some strange reason, it keeps on happening. And that's also what was, I think that's why the word genocide, when it started being used, it's used a lot in many different contexts, and because it's the ultimate crime, and so very often people, when they want to express how horrific something happening is, they kind of immediately start saying it's a genocide or it might be a genocide. But for Armenians, calling it genocide when they have experienced a genocide, I really do think it was the awakening of something, and it was not this tendency to try to say it's the ultimate crime happening. It was just the same images. And I remember, probably you saw those, a lot of people were taking images from 1915, people walking through the desert in Syria and Derzor, and just putting the pictures of people waiting
yeah,
to get out of Karabakh. And you cannot not see that when you're Armenian.
yeah,
Like, it's in there. Like, we grew up with those images. But then why it keeps on happening, I don't know. Because you know what? My family fled war in Lebanon as well. When I was in Ukraine, I met the Armenian Ukrainian community, and I was like, come on,
yeah,
why?
right,
Why
right,
does this keep on happening? In Syria, obviously. And
yeah.
so
And
I'm
now
not sure.
Armenians in Jerusalem, Palestine, Israel, like that, you know,
And
yeah,
Lebanon again. And just, I don't know, but it was there. I just think I didn't expect, I never thought I would be working on something like this.
yeah.
And
I, I'm sorry, yeah,
Yeah, go ahead. I don't know. I don't know how to
Well, I
answer
was
this
going to say
question.
you got me thinking. I was still living in Armenia during the 2018 massive
Revolution. Yeah.
change, right? Um, and I wonder, in looking back on it, I think that's exactly it. That I think, that upheaval really took off when young people really got involved. I remember our university students blocking roads, getting arrested, this and that. And I wonder if one of the, in my mind, at least to me personally, but I think maybe to a lot of people, I think there are two parallel tragedies, right? There's the actual kind of criminality of this ethnic cleansing and the war and Karabakh and so forth. Parallel to that is, I think, just what a surreal turn of events things were from 2018. Because in 2018, it's exactly what you're saying. The amount of hope and the amount of goodwill and the amount of, there was some sense of this like collective, um, we're really going to do something here. We're really going to do something great for our country and so forth. I think those are parallel tragedies that are, I think, very, like, it, it, if that was very profound for me, and I'm not a native to Armenia, I can only imagine. I wonder what it was like and what it is like, um, especially for younger people, who, it's not only the war and what happened in the war, but it's also that, well, there was this so-called kind of revolution in 2018 that got the world's attention. I mean, that was a once in a lifetime, probably once in a century type of a thing. And yet it it almost seems like it never happened in a way or something. Do you know what I mean? I wonder if you felt, or if you hear about that from the people that now are in Armenia, from Karabakh, or if you hear that from Armenians in Armenia, that you come into contact with, that they feel two levels of kind of either disappointment or anger or sadness or whatever, that it's the war, but also like what happened with all that we did in 2018.
Now that you mention it, I remember it, but I feel like the revolution was a century ago and I had completely forgotten about it. Also because war takes over everything, so
Yeah.
you know. But now that you mention it, it is true that in 2020 and 2021, so it was actually, the war happened just 2 years after the revolution, and I had forgotten that. But you're right. People would still be talking about that
Mhm.
at the very beginning, like right after, and in 2021, and also when we had we thought there was a coup, then there wasn't, and the elections, and then Pashinyan was reelected. So that's when people were still talking about the revolution, and you had a lot of people who were very disappointed because of the war. People who were supporters of Pashinyan and the revolution, and then they were very disappointed because the war happened. Some people who thought, okay, but the war, it's not really his fault, and we're still kind of, I guess, trying to live on the hopes of what the revolution had brought, and we're like, okay, the war happened, but it's still going to be fine. And those conversations did happen, and among the youth, you're right, but that actually didn't last for long, I would say, because once the horror started again and again and again,
Right.
it's like it was too far. Nobody was even thinking about it,
Right.
and kind of everybody was blaming everybody. But I'm not even sure people, it wasn't really even revolution or not revolution or Pashinyan. It's just like, this needs to stop, and this keeps on happening. And that was the fuck. And then people were like, Armenia is next. And, there were the attacks on Armenia, and then 2022, and just, it was nonstop war. So
Right.
I feel like that did happen, that conversation did happen, but it didn't last for long, because war takes over everything and you forget. I had forgotten seriously about the revolution until you mentioned it. It's not even in the timeline. It's
Right.
not even, you know,
Right. Interesting.
it's just war. And then
People just
this
go
must
into survival
close.
mode. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Survival mode. I think all of us,
Yeah.
obviously people there, but even people in the diaspora. I
Yeah.
think we forgot ourselves a bit in the last years because we were just
Yeah.
all in survival mode. And also all the PTSD woke up, and then it's hard to think. It's hard to think about politics. It's hard to think about the revolution, and you tend to forget many things.
Yeah, and I think I would also, from my perspective, I would also say the Armenian world is not good at the best of times. The Armenian world is not good at critical discourse, critical in a positive way. I mean, at the best of times, it's not very good at having a civil, open, critical discussion about what are we doing, what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, why. Things often devolve quickly into blaming and being reactionary and defensive and angry and all this stuff. So I think yeah, I totally see what you're saying. Connected to that, also getting back to your work and then kind of connecting it kind of to what Project Save does and what some other organizations do and what larger World Heritage type organizations have been saying. So obviously now, you know, Karabakh has been completely uh, taken over and depopulated and so forth by Azerbaijan, and they are already either destroying or repurposing or simply lying about Armenian uh, uh, structures in Karabakh, whether it's churches or monuments or whatever it might be, or just the history itself. So, I like one of the things that I really like about your project is that yes, it is photography, but you also went into the objects, the actual materiality of what people are trying to save. Um, and so that brings me to the question about, so now there's all this talk about heritage preservation and the dangers to the cultural heritage of Karabakh. Azerbaijan has always had propaganda and lies about actually not just Karabakh, but Armenia itself, which Azerbaijan claims is Western Azerbaijan. So there's always been this absurd stuff. Um, what What are I have my thoughts about this, but what are your thoughts about, your project in terms of cultural preservation and archiving? And obviously now we are kind of hopefully going to continue having some collaborations and so forth with Project Save and Artworks projects. But what are your thoughts about this? And not just about Karabakh, but even Armenia itself. What is the state of kind of the state and the understanding of cultural preservation, archival work, the importance of it? What are your thoughts about that?
To be honest, it is not something I had in mind when I was working there.
Okay.
And I think it's not something most Armenians have in mind or have had in mind before 2020. The usual like churches and everything, and it's good for tourism, but I don't think we were imagining something like this could happen. Maybe we were not paying enough attention also to, yes, to propaganda and rewriting history, which is also very common, and everybody does that, and it happens in Ukraine, happens different places. But I realized after what happened that my work had some value as an archive, that it was not just, okay, it's a news story and we publish the pictures and that's it. I realized there was value in that because, well, when they started destroying some monuments, for example, and you can see that with Google Image, and like we do have a lot of tools also that didn't exist a long time ago.
Right.
And so you can literally go and see. And I realized, oh, oh, okay, they already destroyed that church. I have a few pictures of that church, and I even have this picture of this guy who got married, and I was there. And so, I mean, I don't know if it's going to change anything. I don't think so. But I have proof. And it's not just me, a lot of different people. So not just the photographers or the artists, but for example, there are people who did like 3D scanning of some places. And at first it was not with, the goal of preserving the cultural heritage, because we didn't really know what was going to happen. But I think that now there was a change in everybody's perspective. I think that journalists and photographers understand that what they're working on might also have a value, as it's historical what happened. So it's also historical what we did, even though we didn't realize it at the time.
Right.
And I think there are more and more initiatives to try to work, organize, archive everything. I see it happening now.
Yeah.
Now, I'm very sad that it's just happening now, because I think we also missed a lot of opportunities. And I'm also not sure it's going to change anything, because, if they destroy it, they destroy it. And then they can say it was not there. And yes, we can come out with pictures and other types of proof that it was there and there was that church. Now, is it going to change anything? I don't know. But at least now I think it has changed, and I don't have a real answer, because I don't know if it's going to be useful, but at least we're doing it.
Right.
And before we didn't do it.
Right.
And now in Armenia itself, especially in all the border areas which are still in danger, people are doing the work.
Yeah.
People are going and doing the work, and it's not just churches. It can be, I don't know, an old bridge, like some kind of monument,
Right.
and people know what can happen now. So they do the work. I hope it doesn't happen, and we just keep it for other purposes. But in case it happens, I think we changed our perspective on it, and that's already good.
Right. So kind of a last question. So what is kind of next for you with this project? Are there like follow-ups with some of the people that are now in Armenia that you had met, or what are the next steps maybe?
So, okay, I'll say this. I think for a while I didn't know how to end this project. I think with all projects, when you're a freelance photographer or whatever, you don't really know when to end a project when it's a personal project. Unfortunately, I think the events, they forced me to stop it, because the end was the ethnic cleansing and then what people took. It's been also an emotional roller coaster, and I think I need to also maybe slow it down a bit with Armenia and everything. But what I hope is that people will see this project. So maybe also having physical exhibitions, also having an educational side. Always happy to teach and show the project. And I think also it's an interesting case of how do you cover a region you cannot access as a journalist. Because we couldn't access Karabakh during the whole blockade, but unfortunately it happens very often. It's happening right now in many regions of the world. So how do you still cover it? How do you still get those stories out? How do you still humanize people? How do you do the work when you cannot physically go as a journalist, photographer, reporter? I think that's also something I would like to explore. And this is an example, and I would like to work on that. And then I do have the idea of doing more of those portraits, because that's the archiving part as well. But I don't know in what capacity, when, or how that's going to happen. But I would like to maybe collect more of those testimonies so that we have them somewhere, and to make something with that.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Astrig. This has been absolutely wonderful. I want to thank everyone who's joined us today. This is, by the way, has been recorded. So this will be part of, if you go to projectsave.org in a couple of weeks or so, this will be part of our Conversations on Photography page. So you'll be able to watch it there or on our YouTube channel. I really want to thank WorksProjects and Borun specifically. This has been such a wonderful collaboration. I hope it'll be the first of many. I encourage everyone to follow Astrig's work and the other wonderful photographers at artworksprojects.org. We certainly hope that at some point Astrig will come to the United States. We hope that we'll be able to exhibit her work at Project Save in Boston and hopefully elsewhere. So again, thank you so much. Project Save has a number of events coming up this fall and into the winter. You can check out that information at projectsave.org. And of course, you can also check out our today's partners website, artworksprojects.org, for more information. And we hope to see you all again soon. Astrig Agopian, thank you again so very much. I appreciate it. Thank you all
Thank
very
you for
much.
having me. Thank you.
Of course. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.